So for this problem, I'm going to start with number 9, and I'm going to refer back to this equation for all of these questions. But again, back to number 9, it's asking us to describe the transformation. So I want to look at this equation in 3 parts. At the beginning, I have this 2.5, right? That means that we're going to have a vertical stretch by a factor of exactly what it is, 2.5. Okay. The second part is you got to see if this equation is shifting from my left to my right at all. So normally there's parentheses around theta. In this case there isn't, so we are not shifting left or right. Let's say if there was something inside there, and if I had, like, for example, -3 inside parentheses right here, that means I would be shifting to the right 3. If it was a +3, then I'd be shifting to my left 3. But nothing's inside parentheses, so I'm not shifting left or right at all. On the outside, I do have a -1, so that means I'm shifting down 1. So it's going to be a vertical shift down 1. If it was adding 1, it would be a shift up. So now that brings me to graphing, and I need to get this equation onto the graph. So the very first thing I actually do is usually graph my midline, and I look at my shift up or down. So if it shifts up or down, that means my midline changes. So in this case, we are shifting down 1. So my midline is going to go through y equals -1 right here. So I'm going to write the equation for my midline as y equals -1. Now I want to kind of write the, almost draw in the top part of the graph and the bottom part. So from this midline, I have a vertical stretch of 2.5. That means I want to make my function go as high as 2 and then a half above my midline. So it's going to be no higher than that. And then also I'm going to be no lower than 2.5 below my midline. So I'm going to count that out. Okay, now that brings me to my range. So the lowest possible y that I'm going to have on this graph is a -3.5, and that will be included in my graph. So I'm going to put brackets, comma, and then I need my highest point of my graph, which in this case is going to be a 1.5. It's not going to go any higher than that. So now we have to finish up sketching out this graph. So it's a cosine in my equation, so that means I'm going to either start above it or below the midline, and it's positive, so that means I'm going to start above the midline. So let me switch colors here. I'm going to start my graph right here. That's going to be cosine, and let me rewrite my equation. That was 2.5 cosine of theta in parentheses, and then it was -1. So normally the value in front of theta represents how many cycles we need to get in before 2 pi. In this case, it's an invisible 1, so I only need to fit in 1 cycle. So I'm going to cut this in half. I'm going to say, all right, halfway here is pi, so I need to get a half a cycle in there. So if I'm starting right up here at 1.5, I'm going to curve down, and this is going to be a quarter of my circle, or my cycle, right? And then I'm going to kind of curve back down here, and that's going to be another quarter of my circle. So that, like right here, from 0 to pi, is going to be a half of my cycle, a quarter and another quarter. So I'm going to keep going to pi, because I need to get all the way to here. So I do another quarter, and then I need to do another quarter like this. So then I end up right there. And that's going to be another quarter. So let me do that in a different color. Here is another quarter, and then another quarter. And there's my graph, the trigonometric function. I have a quarter here, a quarter, another quarter, so that's 4 quarters. That makes 1 full cycle from 0 to 2 pi. This question is asking us to come up with the equation that reflects this transformation. So it says we need to write new function g of x, which is started here, and it's going to be based off of sine of theta. So I'm going to put sine of theta right here. Okay, now it says our graph is being shifted up 1 unit. So outside of parentheses, that controls whether it goes up or down. So if it's shifting up 1 unit, we need to add 1 unit. Now it says we are also going to our left 3 pi over 2 units. So that means I need to change something inside parentheses. So after theta, I'm either going to add or subtract 3 pi over 2. Since I'm moving to my left, I'm going to do addition. That shifts things to the left. If I want to shift this to the right, I would have to do minus 3 pi over 2. And then that's it. And the only other change that maybe you'd want to make is if this needed to be reflected over the midline, you'd put a negative in front like that, but it isn't, so we're going to keep it positive.